So my name's Sean Smith. I'm incredibly excited to be here. I actually live up in Saratoga Springs, New York. Most of the time I have not been in the area doing my work, so it's really nice to be able to come here and participate with this group. So let me give you a little bit on what we're going to talk about today. As a matter of an agenda, I only have 3 really specific topics that I want to take you through. This is a bit more about a developer and thinking about the future, thinking about artificial intelligence and how we use that to design our systems, how we use that to change human behavior, or for the better or for worse. And part of that is figuring out which one's the better and which one's the worst. So I'm going to give you a quick welcome and snapshot about me, my history, some of the stuff I've done. I'm going to ask a little bit about you guys, what you've been doing. First, we'll talk a little bit about understanding how we want to think about crafting tomorrow, literally designing the future ahead of us. It's going to be kind of fun. The second part is, what's the transition? What is a way to intelligently evolve using our technology that we have? And then the last piece here is, what's the machine force ahead, and how can we act with an actual machine force? And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll get into some questions and discussions. Fair enough? Yes, everybody's still eating. All right, so I want to start first by chatting about you. You don't have to speak up if you don't want to. Here's what I want to know. Who are you? Are you a technology engineer in this group? Data science or AI specialization? Would you define yourself as products, UX design, or IT strategy and management? So let's try the first one. All you have to do is raise your hand. Technology engineering. Okay. Data science and AI specialization. Okay. Product, UX, and design. Okay, this is kind of an even split. And I think some of you guys are raising your hand twice, which is good. IT strategy and management. Amazing. You're going to like all this. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a big fan of the, I guess, the logo chart. I've had so many amazing experiences with these companies. I remember the people I work with, the project I worked on, so it's exciting for me to look at this. Like as I said, my name's Sean Smith. I am a Google developer. I'm the founder of a, I guess you could call it an early company now, startup called Fluxive.ai. You can check that out on the web, more about that. I am the author of this book series. The first book has been published. You'll see there on the left. It's called Influence Design in the AI Era. It's basically a college-level textbook. And then I am the head of customer success and support for, I guess, what Chartis calls the leading model risk management platform in the industry right now. It's a company called Valid Mind. You can check that out and look it up too. So what's exciting about what's here in this presentation is it's kind of all of that stuff wrapped up in one to give you a look ahead, give you some strategy of things to think about, and then as you go into the industry or as you grow in the industry, where is it that you can help and find those opportunities? My history has kind of gone through a series of research, academic research into what I would tell you is open systems research, population dynamics, fisheries dynamics, and then into business process, and everything at the end has been data science, AI, and, well, there was a big data period in there that was fun too. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of crafting tomorrow. So you're going to see 2 specific things in this slide presentation. You see these awesome, amazing graphics that really pull you ahead, and then you're going to see some marked up sketches of things you actually really need to think about. So the sketches are obviously from my book, the designs are from all these crazy things that we can get, and it's a really good blend. So the first thing that happens when you go into an organization is that you get a job, you get placed into a specific part of the organization. You might be in the IT group, you might be in the data science group, but when you're a developer, you're actually pushed into the IT organization. And so it's really important to understand that the organization doesn't necessarily think like you. So part of the illustration here is in the background. If you've ever seen Gartner's analytical maturity model that talks about descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive outcomes and how we drive up that food chain for ourselves, well, individuals like you and I, we autonomously go through that. We can jump from descriptive to diagnostic, right to predictive, and we know what to do. If you're driving here and you get in a car, or you're going to get a cup of coffee together, you drive down the street, you see brake lights ahead of you, you see a couple of cars off on the right, you say, hey, this might be an accident. And if this is an accident, I'm going to slow down. I don't want to hit it. And as you go by, you might look, but you might remember again, slow down again, because this is also when accidents happen. We do that seamlessly. When you join a company in a very large organization that might have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees, they don't work like that. They have to go through stages of analysis to get the information. They have to build their descriptive data. Then they have to build their diagnostic data. Then, once they find all the diagnostic data and the descriptive data, they have to figure out how to investigate that. They have to figure out if there's a trend or a place in the behavior when you want to predict something. And if you can predict something in business nowadays, then what can you do? Well, you can directly take action to change it. So 4 different levels that the business goes through, and then you have to coordinate that between everybody else. So recognizing that the company that you work for doesn't think like you is really important to understand as you build solutions. The second piece here, I call this the thin wide line. In my book, it's actually a really good discussion, and after 20 or 30 years of meeting with Fortune 100 customers, Fortune 500 customers, I've come to realize that there is a tremendous gap between how leadership thinks about how easy it is to do something and the technology teams in those divisions on how hard it is to actually do something. And so this thin wide line that we talk about is basically where at the top you have your leadership and they say, hey, I want you as a developer to go work with the business processing unit. I want you to figure out how we get customers, how we process those customers, how we push them back. I want you to help them build a new system and set up for that. And so as a developer, we might jump over to that business line. We might say, well, people are going to register. They need new forms. We'll make a new user form. We'll make a new user account. We'll bring them in. The business side is thinking completely different about that. They're not thinking about accounts or logins or anything like that. They want to get rid of all of that stuff, and they want seamless access. I want to know who this person is walking in without even having them build an account or details. And so leadership at the top of these organizations actually looks down at the organization and says, you guys should be able to do this. You both work for the same company, you understand it. Well, the wide part is, when those team members go get in the room, they actually don't really know what they're doing. There's a vision, there's an idea, and the guidance doesn't come down. So recognizing that if you're talking to a business teamer, they have no idea how to build technology like you do, and then being able to make sure that you can explain the steps that you're taking in technology to those business audiences. Because more and more now we're starting to build processes and systems that are integrated together, technology direct with business process flow. Now, the other side of that organizational difference that I talk about is this idea that when you try to do something inside an organization, and when you try to get people to work together, they don't work as seamlessly as you, and they need a lot of information. And so let's take that coffee example where we left here, we drove a car, we went to get a coffee. If you wanted to take the rest of your organization, the company you work for, and you as a group wanted to go get a coffee, it would be much more like this, as opposed to us going together and you driving the car with your hands on the steering wheel, brakes and pedals. Inside an organization, when you have to make a decision, someone has the wipers, someone is navigating, someone's working on the shifter, someone's working on the brakes. And everybody actually has to talk and work together on the same vision. So lots of times we have people that just disappear, go their own way, or come out with solutions that just don't work because they're not paying attention. So 3 big things to understand. We've kind of walked through there to get you into this. Let's talk about how we actually evolve intelligently with artificial intelligence, with data science, with making these applications direct to users. The first thing is the focus. So this is an interesting thing if anybody ever reads about economics, probably not in your courses. But a long time ago, Adam Smith, not sure if I'm a relative or not, but that would be cool. He wrote about this idea of invisible hand, the invisible hand in economics. And he said that in a free market economy, competition and self-interest guide resources to their most valuable uses. So economics, how we exchange ideas, how we work as a business. If I bake bread, it talks up here, a baker is pursuing profits provided by the community with essential bread. So the baker bakes bread, he gets profits. What happens when there's technology that tells someone else to get bread from somewhere else? It completely messes up the free market economy. It has opportunities to influence and change the direction of this. So yes, freedom of choice once drove the communal benefit, but the artificial hand now, I would say, is actually shifting that choice towards a desired organizational interest. And that's probably been happening for a really long time. I mean, you get access to only specific TV stations, you get access to only specific information on your phone, you get access to only specific stuff at work, right? Obviously, that's containing what you actually see, but now there's an opportunity for companies and organizations to be able to drive that back against you. The good thing about this, though, is that there is an opportunity to use this in the right way to help nourish and grow. And I think that's the biggest question that everybody has, is what is that right way? The second piece here, when we talk about this transition, is we need to conduct a bit more of motionless means of interaction. So if you wanted to take a routine, if you wanted to help someone through a process like buying a new phone, I love the whole cell phone thing that's been happening for years. So this is one of those oldie best AI use cases to ever tell everybody. Part of the reason I love it is because years ago I remember my parents taking me into Verizon to the store to be able to get my first cell phone, whatever the heck it was at that point. And I remember all the deals they had, and like every phone was free. But for some reason, they had marked it up in this particular situation where like you had to do things, but the phone was still free. So I remember talking to my dad about, well, Dad, if I get that phone or I get this phone and that exciting thing, and then what happens, right? Well, the phone industry, the cell phone industries, the service, they have to keep giving you new phones, right? They have to keep pushing that technology out to you. So you have things now like that new every 2 use case, where every 2 years you get a new phone. Well, they need you to come back. There's actually models that help these industries predict whether or not you're going to churn, whether or not you're going to leave that company. And if you're going to leave that company, well, they stop and they say, how high is this level of risk? If I know that you're actually going to leave my company, I want to do something about it. But what we're starting to find out is it's not about the idea that, hey, I have a predictive model. I have a model that tells me that you're going to leave my service. I should pick up the phone and call you and say, listen, this data science model just told me that you're going to leave my service. I can't believe that. You should stay here. That's not what we're going to do. I would never do that. I don't think anybody would ever do that. If you knew something was going to happen, the last thing you would want to do is directly jump in front of it, right? Our opportunity now is to use a bit more of emotionless means of interaction to guide that person to a better path. Have you guys gone through that cell phone cycle? Have you gone through the new every 2? Have you gone through the Verizon stores? It's artificial intelligence predictions all over the place to figure out what is the best opportunity to get you to change service, change carriers, change phones, upgrade, and them to keep you as a subscriber. They're getting better at it. The image that you see up here, unfortunately, that I didn't explain, is just kind of the bare bones basic of if you understand that something's going to happen, you know, at the top here on the left-hand side, they're just basically barreling, pushing it forward. I know this outcome's going to happen. Let's make it happen. That might not be so good. You might overdo it, and you have to course correct afterwards. You know, the second one is like, well, can we force it? Can we stand on top of the rock? Can we shift the rock? What can we do? Well, that's probably not the best idea because that could cause other issues. And then the third one on the side is basically the person saying, listen, there's a small, minute thing that I can do that would make this situation move forward. And that's the option that I need to look for. And that's the option that I need to look for 3 days, 6 days, 20 days, 90 days out. So when we talk about this, you'll hear some concepts that I talk about in my book about this idea of influence architecture. If I know I can influence the future, if I know I can set up a sequence of events to make changes, why wouldn't I do that as a company? Why wouldn't I do that to nourish the interactions that I might have with my customers, or to nourish the interactions I might have with the particular product that I was getting, or what I was delivering? And so making sure that we have this proper alignment when we're crafting tomorrow is really critical. If you make a change, if you actually intervene in a process and make that change, you're no longer on the same ground you were before. So the smaller influence you can make to have a change happen is exactly what we want to do, especially as we look this over time. So this happens now. We're at this point where you're walking down the street. It's the morning. You're tired. You walk past the Starbucks. Starbucks has an app on your phone or connects to you and says, "Hey, stop in for a cup of coffee. Today's discount is 10%. Well, that's great. That's amazing. Part of that is being done just because you walked by. It's not really, I guess, targeted. It's a bit more of just an outreach campaign. And so what you're seeing here is, well, there's more to come. There's this idea, if we take your biologics, your behavior, how you're feeling, what time you got up, all that stuff is stored. There's access to it. We grant access to people to have it. We can actually say, hey, listen, you're tired today. Come on in and have a free cup of coffee on us. That builds loyalty, that builds trust, that builds driving the engagement forward. And you can do that in every form across your organization. But it's very specifically tailored. This message is direct to me on the day when I was tired, when I got up late, when they said, hey, you know what, we already started preparing your cup of coffee. You just get it on your way. Sean, you're having a tough day. Wow, I'd love that. Would you pay for it? Would you set that up? If they said, hey, Starbucks said, throw $50 in your account, we'll have your coffee ready every time you walk by our store, just by your phone, because we know your travel. You just have to give them a couple of data points, and they would make the coffee for you. So planning this stuff out in front is very, very unique. It's something that we're not doing very good yet, and we have no way of cross-controlling it, meaning if I'm, have an AI routine that's out there, or an agent that's out there that's giving free coffees to people as they walk by, it doesn't really connect to the other side of the system where it says, hey, this guy just got a whole bunch of free stuff the other day. And, we're probably giving too much away. So as a part of my book, I start to talk about this concept of a machine force. What is that? Well, organizations have workforces, right? They also have machines. They have a machine force. So as a CEO or a CIO of an organization now, I'm starting to look at my workforce and my machine force on how these things start to get put together and how they actually interact between the two. And those interactions are shaping how we build new business processes, how we build new use cases, and how we build new experiences, like the idea of walking past a Starbucks store and getting yourself an automated cup of coffee. So there's a couple of core strategies here that talk about things we need to do to start to align a workforce and a machine force. So the first thing is this concept of an insight compass. How many people have built business intelligence dashboards? Click, Tableau, Power BI, Looker. Yes? One? No? Maybe? How many people have seen a dashboard? Let's start there. Awesome. Excellent. This is a dashboard here in ValidMind. ValidMind's a model risk management platform, AI governance platform. It is a platform that allows us to be able to automate evaluating how well an AI model is doing, and then automatically document the model, automatically document the agent, automatically push it through a process to get the model validated. So models go through this intense validation cycle inside of banks. If you think about credit models or scoring, they go from a developer who does all the tests into documentation that goes into a validator, which is kind of like a second type of developer who basically has to go through and assess every test that the developer did in the model. They have to do a series of their own tests, and they have to check the model against compliance and regulation, things like SR 11.7 in the US, SS 123. They're pretty straightforward but really boring documents that say you have to govern and validate your models before you use them. So you have a dashboard here, and what has been a challenge over the years about dashboards is that we've put descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive data all in the same dashboard. And we never tell anybody what the information is. We say, here's your dashboard. Well, is this data that was built about yesterday? Is this data that was built to tell me about something tomorrow? So in all of these organizations, in all of those providers, Qlik, Tableau, Power BI, Domo, Looker, I've actually worked with a bunch of all of them almost at this point, there's no indicator on the dashboards that actually tell you what kind of information is in the dashboard. Wouldn't you want to know if somebody built a model to predict something was going to happen and that's the data you were looking at? Especially if the model's wrong, or could be wrong, or is highly skeptical. I had the privilege of building a model for CNN to help them predict demand usage based upon how much people want to watch videos on screens and TVs and everything from their short segments. You know, just a change in the way you built the model, just one change in the parameters can make it look good to great, or good to bad. So what I talk about is this idea of an insight compass. If I said that to you without seeing the slide, what would you think? An insight compass. Any guesses? I would think that you were telling me somehow you could give me some direction based upon my insight. Maybe, I guess. That's a good example. So an insight compass is an opportunity to understand, well, if I'm out in the middle of the woods, there's probably two very specific things that I need, right? I need a map to know where I am, if I can, and I need a compass to tell me which way to go. So what's fun about today is when we start to think about these ideas of artificial intelligent models and they're predictive and they know everything and they do everything, I want you to think of that scenario where you're standing in the woods and you don't know where you are. Because what happens is when you focus so much on the data and the information that gets put into these models or the prediction that you have, you're focused on an individual point, an individual calculation, and you miss seeing everything else. So an insight compass is the opportunity to say, well, this data is your map, the compass is the direction. And the compass is telling you whether or not the information is going to get you somewhere, or it's just general information for now. So you can see some examples up here. We've drawn the pill design, the pyramid design. So descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, those are the four different categories that Gartner uses to rate the analytical maturity model. And so it helps you understand the information that you're looking at, what it is. If I have a dashboard that tells me about customers, I might want to know if there was data in there that was predicting the customers versus data in there that was just guessing. And so some of that stuff's not identified. So when you add this image, it can be organizationally charged, it can be a logo from your organization. You can actually figure out, just by a glance, what information you're looking at. Whether it's, hey, this is the summary of what you're looking at, where you're standing in the middle of the woods, or hey, this is the direction to get out of the woods, to move forward. I threw this guide in here. I'm more than happy to send this to anybody if they would like. It's actually a PDF. You can sort of see it in the middle. It's actually an overview of model risk management. If anybody's interested in that, on the backhand side of it, it has a really good diagram that shows you the process for model risk management, as well as kind of the stages and steps and the interaction that happens in between. So if you're interested, I'm happy to send that to you. You'll see my email pop up here at the end. Something else that we don't have, that we're not keeping, is a way to understand what we did yesterday. This is one of the biggest problems that I think we have in corporate organizations these days is that typically when you build a company, when you build an organization, you find the best guy or girl to lead it, and you say, it's yours, go. And 2-3 months go down the road, and 2-3 years, and the board says, you know what, our leaders aren't doing this right. Let's get rid of them, and let's put some new people in. Or the company gets bought, the company gets shifted. Well, the leadership at an organization sometimes doesn't realize that they're doing the exact same thing they did before, or they have a whole new philosophy on how to do things that isn't even relative because they brought it from a different part of the market. And so knowing what happens at the organization would be incredibly powerful. If somebody asked you, hey, what did you do 2 days ago or 3 days ago? I can't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning by the time I get to this point in the day. Honestly. But think about this from what we talked about earlier in the context of an organization. If these seats were full and everybody in here was a participant in our company and we were all working together, there'd be a lot of information that you or I didn't know about what everybody else was doing. This would also be super helpful to smart machines that wanted to know what the entire organization was doing. So this is a glimpse at a visual world, I guess. I have a colleague, Adam, who does amazing drawings. What if you had those amazing goggles on and you chose your insights and it came up, said 2 weeks ago, you decided to reorganize the team to make a better company run. So that's the idea, is adapt your company to the market. Make sure you can align to what's needed. Make sure you can produce the products at the rate that you can or the services at the rate you can based upon your demand. So if you had a way to actually organize that, reorganize that, you'd be able to understand what you did yesterday and how good you could tailor yourself to the environment. So a couple of points up here. One, decision history. Have a log of all the decisions, including who made them, when, and why. What about context? Context, the specific data points or insights from each decision. Outcomes analysis, reporting and summaries that examine impact and results of each division, providing valuable feedback for future decision-making. Alternate scenarios. Has anybody ever seen an automated machine learning platform? Anybody? Awesome, let me tell you about it. So automated machine learning platforms take platforms like Big Squid, Data Robots, there's a bunch more out there. There's Amazon ones, there's Google ones, there's independent ones. Automated machine learning takes your data, and if you want to predict a yes or no answer, it takes that data, throws it into a system where it runs hundreds of models to figure out which one's the best. That's a little truth here that I'll tell you. There is no specific model or there is no specific algorithm model that's best for your data. You don't know that until you run it against all of the models to be able to try it. So automated machine learnings take that concept, they take all your data, they run it against 500,000 models, they come back, they rank them, and they say this model scored the best, this is exactly the model that you want to be able to use. And then once you actually find that model, you can go into a series of decisions in the backhand side and actually ask some questions like, in the case of the cell phone industry, if I lowered my monthly bill rate to consumers, would I get more customers? If I increased how much I'm charging customers, would my customer count go up or down? Would my loyalty go up or down? So there's a way to actually play with the math on the backhand side of these artificial intelligence routines to help us make decisions as we move forward. And last but not least, this is kind of where everybody's starting to head, although we're starting to talk about this idea of artificial intelligence and agents. When I talk about a machine force, it's all those agents talking to everybody. It's all the other side of the organization besides the workforce that we have. So this is where we're starting. We're starting with things that need to be helpful to us, but they can't be so critical. Things like your oracle or your strategist or your storyteller or your change agent. If you have a strategist, it might be an assistant for you at the organization. And you recognize it as a strategist because it doesn't have all the answers. And that's the concept that we're starting to get past everybody with artificial intelligence, is that, wow, it's tremendous, it's powerful, it gives us tons of insights and it's usually correct. because we keep the same behaviors. But what happens when something like COVID comes into play and the world stops? Those historical trends and those historical behaviors all go away. And we have to figure out new and different routines to be able to understand how to act. We can still do that. We can take one of these storytellers or strategists, we can use it, just like I mentioned before, to be able, on the back side of the model, run some scenarios. If people used to behave like this, then they should behave close to it in the future. So there are a lot of banks that we worked with to be able to get them through the financial crisis, or I should say the COVID crisis, to be able to help them understand, well, how would their subscribers act next? What could we do to help them? And certain banks went so far as to figure out ways to if you had a natural disaster and the machines detected that you had a natural disaster in your area and you had a particular credit rating, your bank would automatically extend a line of credit to you to say, hey, we know you're having problems in your area. You could probably use some cash to fix it up. Here's a low or zero interest loan for helping move you forward, just based upon helping their consumers. So the goal behind that is to try to build this workforce, machine force trust, recognizing that you can do a whole lot in your machine force and you can do a whole lot in your workforce, and when they work together, you can do a whole ton more. So that's it from my side as a walkthrough up here. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to me. My LinkedIn page is there. Sorry about that. Sean Smith is kind of a common name, so I had to find some different ways to write it. And Flexive is my startup, and like I said, I work for Valid Mind with model risk management. Any questions I can answer about all this type of stuff in the industry, moving forward, jobs, anything like that? Yeah.
Do you foresee the winner and the person that knows how to utilize AI is the one that actually tells AI what they need in clear language and how to utilize the various AI
agents? I think we're digging into a lot of the best ways to use artificial intelligence. I think it's all experimentation, even from the idea of what's the best model am I going to use, what's the best process, and if you wanted to understand, some things like does this person need a new phone, or are they going to cancel? You'd have to build a model for figuring out if they were going to cancel. Then you'd have to build a model to figure out whether or not they're going to cancel in the next 30, 60, 90 days, and then you have to build a model. So all of a sudden now you have a tremendous amount of information in different views. So I think what we're trying to do right now is figure out the best way to organize those together, and I don't think anybody has a perfect answer. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
What's a skill in the industry that you have seen that's persisted throughout the whole life? What would you say is like a skill that people should have, or like a characteristic or trait to be successful despite the ups and downs of the whole AI wave of what everyone?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been so complementary to this AI has been data management, the history of data warehouses, data lakes, all that type of stuff, whatever, just plain old data management, right? Understanding your data, organizing your data, aligning it to a specific company, and how they see it. So skills to be able to do that, skills to be able to do the analysis on the data. So the business intelligence systems that I mentioned are handy. They're simple enough that you can drop a spreadsheet in there and make some charts and graphs and things like that. There's always organizations that need people to manage data and organize their data. They need people to do the analysis. And then even with this concept of the perfect PhD level data scientist is starting to fade in favor of automated machine learning systems, automated ML. But they still need people to do the explanation. And then what I would say is, as far as building the models, I've seen a lot of the data scientists start to move to the validation side to make sure they're correct and accurate before they go into production.
And my follow-up question actually to that would be, I see that you were a director of customer success, head of customer success, etc. So I actually have a really coming up with director of product at our company. And so my question would be, if you are communicating with the customer, and if you are directing the direction of the product of the company, what stakeholders do you have in mind when you are making your decisions?
Depends on what kind of product it is.
So our company is a tech that's worked with schools.
Okay. So you have a market segment that you might look at, like the marketing. There's not necessarily a marketing officer at a school or educational institution, but I mean at colleges, obviously, there's a marketing division that you would talk to. So there's an entire hierarchy in there. You'd look towards, the management office. There's boards at some of these organizations that try to do outreach from that standpoint. And then general admissions and audience gathering as well, too. You could go through.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you talked a lot about the sort of technical side of this, the data, and business intelligence side of this. I'm wondering if you thought much about how should organizations be reconfiguring the human structure of the organization? Should you be making organizational changes to reflect the new world? Anything you can say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting topic that anytime I've stepped into a customer's site with new technology to offer them, everybody's worried that I'm going to get rid of their jobs. And I think what we started to realize is that there's a lot of organizations out there that are just completely underwater, understaffed, and they can't keep up. And helping them understand that there's a new way to do work, this is your new way to do work, and moving those kind of users into these roles and training them is probably the best kind of discussion path to be able to do that. So I've been in the process of implementing a super large model risk management automation at a super large bank. The bank has several hundred validators, developers, administrators, all that type of stuff that goes through it. I think the realization for them that they are coming out of spreadsheets and emails and emailing attachments and things like that to go into a fully automated solution that you're uploading stuff. When you submit your documents, it checks them for you and then notifies you that you have a task. There's a human shift that's hard to get over there from older generations into newer generations. The idea that, and this cloud computing thing is the same thing. People are very hardened to their servers and their disks and it's like, oh, I'm just going to put it in the cloud. Well, where does it go? It doesn't matter anymore. That's a hard thing for a lot of people to get over. Same thing with that work transition. And if anything more, we're starting to see, because we can speed up how fast these groups are working, because we can help them drive insights further and get to more use cases that they need to do as an organization, they're actually growing some of the teams. But it's a crazy difficult shift. I mean, that one sheet that I showed you guys is probably, I can pull it up real quick, it's probably a really great example of trying to take an older audience and show the older audience kind of ways to be able to do this. Ways to be able to get into these systems and how to use them and so here's an example, right? I talk to customers about model risk management platforms and the other side of artificial intelligence, and to be able to change that discussion into something that's usable. So this is ValidMind. This is the company I work for as well. We're talking about exponential demand for AI. Everybody sees AI coming. We have regulations around the world that banks need to adhere to. So these are the regulations that you can see here in each region. They're starting with banks. FinTech is always the first to go. FinTech, we've started to see the same problems with insurance. There's an executive amendment on insurance to be able to have them check their models as well. So it helps to understand, what all this stuff is, but then the idea of like having a picture of what happens inside these systems, I have found is tremendously valuable. And it doesn't have to be the exact accurate setup. Like, for example, this is your developer. This is a coder, a developer building a model. This is a validator on this second line of defense. And basically, when the developer builds a model, these two have to work together to be able to test it on both sides. And so this validator can't use any evidence that the developer has. They have to go build out their own evidence to make sure it works. But inside our platform, you can see there's kind of a workflow of all the different steps that they do. So that makes a tremendous difference. You can draw out a picture and say, this is actually what's happening inside the system. It's pretty powerful. You guys can email me if you want a copy of this. I'll send it to you. Anything else? We got a couple more minutes. Yeah?
Just have a question, kind of related to the book that you, what would you say would be like the best skills, if you could have them, to like kind of complement the background you would want in that book? Like, you quoted like Adam Smith, so like microeconomics would be probably a good skill to also, like, what would be like your ideal kind of skill set that go in tandem with that?
So inside of my book, I talk about this emerging role that's starting to happen at companies. I don't necessarily know that they're calling it this name, but I call them influence architects. They're people that actually stand up the sequence of events to make the outcomes that they want for a company. And I think part of the reason why the organizations don't really know this yet is because they're like depending on people in different business units, and they really don't know that a lot of this should be centralized. So from that standpoint, I think one of the biggest things is to be kind of a researcher, really dig into what's happening with the data. When I talked earlier about the data and the analysis of the data, that's the information that you have about your company. And if you don't have enough information, you need to figure out ways to go get it, or figure out where it is. So understanding that the data you have is tremendous, because that's how you can do your analysis. So SQL, data skills, all that type of stuff, bare bones starting point. To understand, the details in my book are guiding a lot of these organizations when we talk to them about how you do this. It is I don't know that I do a good job of trying to help people get through the organizational hierarchies that we have today to be able to talk through it, but I think it's a bit more of the momentum. So economics is good to know, what's happening in the world, the macro climate as compared to the microclimate. I think there's understanding your industry, who your competitors are, what they're doing. So a lot of this starts to be on-the-job knowledge. So from training, I would say, all your technology, data science classes, data engineering classes, understanding once you get into a company, learn what they do and how they do it with the data, and then you can apply a lot of the principles. Yeah.
Also, can you give some background on, you said influence architects? I haven't really heard of that term, so it's like an academic, something similar.
Yeah, they're just people that are, it's a business side term for what the data scientist is doing on the data side. So a lot of the leads of their business units are doing this. Some are doing better than others because they know the data and the analysis. I think there's someone that has access to all the information that they would see across the organization. They can help manage that information, slice it and dice it whichever way they want. They're probably going to be so quick and fast with a BI system to be able to pull it apart that they can dig into the insights that they need. They can actually tell the company where they could get extra information or figure out ways to get that extra information. inside those scenarios. It's about digitizing what you can to know what's happening. And so knowing how to collect the data, ways to collect the data, where to get it from is tremendously important. That gets into a lot of, edge components and things like that. I wouldn't say you would have to be an expert in the edge components because they're all unique themselves. But just being able to understand the kind of having data domains, or however you want to break up the data, however they're teaching you guys in school now, either data domains or domains that are specific to the business, I should say, customer domain, that type of stuff. And then obviously cloud technology is, running fast forward. My startup uses Google Cloud basically to do all our work too. Yeah.
And maybe when it comes like from Google perspective, there's certificates that you can do online certificates.
Yeah.
Like India Data Engineer certification, there's one for AI specific. Those are good introductory. So you can do like certificate experience.
Yeah.
It's a nice, quick and easy way to get into specific topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the challenge too is you're going to learn a different way to do things based upon the provider that you get information from. So knowing the ways to do things. Sometimes what's great about education is that they typically use all the free tools. And I have to be honest with you, I can't tell you the number of times that I've just used a free tool to be able to do my work and help customers and things like that. When you get tied into a particular platform, there's nothing wrong with it, but your time investment goes into learning that skill set.
But maybe from a client perspective, for example, the engineering you mentioned cloud, there's similar structure in terms of cloud infrastructure, and also you get infrastructure as a service versus software as a service.
Right.
So you need to know from a security standpoint with clients, do they want to keep the data on site, or do they mind going into the cloud? It helps with that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a customer that took data on disks and put it in a FedEx box and shipped it here to be able to be loaded into a data set. So farms in South America have big servers. They record all the data from the farms. They take the disk out, they put it in the FedEx box. That's the quickest way to get the data up here because they don't have a bandwidth to send the data back and forth. And it's still real world. That stuff still happens. It's not all, so to your point about, sometimes what stuff you can learn, the best training is some of those scenarios on the job to be able to do that. So, anything else? 2 more minutes. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's great.